Anthony Towns in the meat grinder leader fan radio network, and KFAN.com. 2 minutes, 10 seconds past 3. That is Central Standard Time. Bumper to Bumper show is back. It's live, it's local, and it is a 3-hour tour on this lovely Thursday here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I am the host of the program, former Ink-Stain Wretch, newspaper of the Twin Cities. My name is Dan Barreiro. Guardsy produces the show, and we thank each and every one of you for your participation in today's proceedings. We're out at 6 for not Vikings programming, obviously, but Golden Gopher men's basketball back in action, hosting the red-hot Michigan Wolverines. Now, did you tell me yesterday, is it Juwan Howard still coaching, or is it Beeline?
That's neither.
Neither. Oh, neither. Okay, neither. Okay.
It's the guy that unfortunately isn't coaching your Indiana Hoosiers.
Oh, man.
Because I think he's an IU guy. Well, Dusty May.
He might be soon. Who knows?
Think they're going to pry him away from Ann Arbor?
It ain't going good. Well, that's a good question. Yeah, come on, man. A Hoosier? If they come calling,
man,
the heartstrings get torn, do they not? Come on.
I don't know.
Well, at this
I don't know anymore.
At this point, it's hard to say what is happening.
I think the Boziches of the world
here's the
have
truth
to
of the
close
matter.
the yearbook.
The truth of the matter is, people would kill for the return of Tom Crean in Indiana.
I tried to tell you.
A statement that, when he left there, people said, are you kidding me? We'll never want to see him again. But that's the way the world works, man. It's because I guess the assumption is always the next thing coming is going to be better, and a lot of times it ain't. A lot of times it is indeed worse.
People keep tweeting, to your point, Tom Crean, with old videos from his time at Indiana,
yes.
Like when they beat Kentucky.
Waxing nostalgic, yes.
When they beat Illinois, and he went out to the entryway at Assembly Hall, which is awesome, by the way. Mm-hmm. And he's thanking everybody for coming, and he's not missing an opportunity to retweet and thanking Hoosier Nation for their great passion.
You certainly can't blame him for
I don't blame him one bit.
Yeah, I expect by next year he'll probably be back coaching somewhere. Maybe here. Who knows? Who's to say? I mentioned off the top of the program that we are indeed your cat in the meat grinder leader. And I know he doesn't play here anymore, and I know for a lot of people it's a sore subject because they miss him and they want him back. And by the way, that's probably another guy where absence has made the heart grow fonder, in part because he's played well, although the Knicks are a little weird, but in part because the folks we got for him, it hasn't worked out from a record standpoint. It certainly didn't work out last night against the Golden State Warriors.
Good crisp start, I thought.
Honestly, I have... We'll get to it. So I guess Cat's crime, sports crime, that he committed yesterday was he's, as I think I mentioned yesterday, out of the lineup, the Knicks playing in Philadelphia against the wretched 76ers. And this will shock you, but the Sixers' big man didn't play.
Embiid didn't play?
He did not play.
That.
Yeah, another, I don't know what his injury is, but Cat's got a thumb issue of some sort.
It's like bone spurs, I think.
Is that what it is?
In his thumb. I saw that headline.
Well, whatever it is, and by the way, we got him next. I don't know if he's going to play. That's there. But he was on the sidelines, out of uniform, street clothes. And apparently in the first half, he was wearing a Philadelphia Eagles jersey.
Yeah.
Or, sweatshirt, whatever it was. And the blowback was apparently great enough, I assume out of New York, that when the Knicks came back for the second half, he was no longer wearing the Eagles jersey.
He changed his clothes.
He had changed his clothes. And this brings up the age-old question, because there's a part of me that says, what's wrong with us?
Yep.
In all honesty, what's wrong with us? He's in Philly. Eagles are still in the playoffs. Are the Eagles his team? I don't even know.
I think they are.
Okay, they must be.
Yes,
okay.
I think they are,
and
historically.
So he decides, and maybe he's even having fun with it, like, hey, the Philly fans, the worst fan, maybe I'll gain a couple Philadelphia fans, whatever. The idea that it would disturb, presumably, New York fans, or particularly New York Giants fans, about anything other than how wretched the team is, I can't say any longer it surprises me because we've had these discussions before, and I think including a couple times here involving Minnesota sports, Minnesota athletes, that I just shake my head. And because it was almost, once he did it, it really was offered up as like, this is unforgivable. This is, how read the room, man.
Read the room, guy.
Read the room, guy. What are you doing? But there's a part, like I said, a large chunk of me that says, come on. If it reminds me a little bit, quite frankly, of when, teams are getting blown out in a game and their fans get annoyed when the other team keeps trying to score, throw the ball down the field with an 82-0 lead. And you say, you got bigger problems, man. All you're doing is bringing more attention to how pathetic your team is. That's the same with the Giants. The Giants are a mess. So I would just not put this very high on my list. And I again, I know people disagree, but I would say Karl Anthony Towns, because he's playing for the Knicks, does not have to root for. We should be able to allow him to root for whatever team he grew up rooting for, if it's another sport.
Yep.
I don't think it should be that big of a deal. But there are people texting us right now, Bradshaw Bright KFAN text line, who agree that he should have gotten obliterated. There's some people calling for his suspension. They think he should be suspended for a half as a result of just how tone deaf his display was. So where are you on this thing? Because we've talked about it before.
Yeah, you say it's a large chunk of you that is bothered by this. Me, it is the entire Guardsy. Full Guardsy is annoyed by this. Now, he went on Twitter last night and basically said he wasn't doing it. He wasn't changing to bow to societal pressure because he was feeling the heat.
Pit it out.
He said there was too many pit stains.
I don't believe that.
Which, if you're wearing a jersey, I don't even think that happens. I'll have to look at the pictures.
Own it. Either
right.
Say, hey, look, I'm sorry, I wasn't hurting anybody's feelings, but don't make it about something it's clearly not, that he was perspiring through it.
But Cat wants everyone to like him.
Yeah, that's true.
We know,
that's true.
I think is one of his strengths, but also maybe a weakness. I have no issue with Karl doing it. I like that. We don't ask. I like when that happens.
Because often it has to do with what you grew up liking.
Exactly right.
That's just part of your character. It shouldn't be, you playfully have fun with them and tweak them and boo them if you want to and say, hey, what are you doing with that Eagles jersey on? But to go beyond that to where somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, have you seen social media, Cat? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's up to you, but you might want to change that shirt, which is likely what took place.
Yes. It always happens, too, when, I remember this happened to Richard Pitino when he would go, to a game at Yankee Stadium. When he'd be visiting family. I think his brother lives out there. Yeah. He grew up liking the Yankees. And so he'd tweet out a picture from Yankee Stadium, go Yankees. And Minnesota fans would go, what about the Twins?
We talked about that, didn't we?
Probably.
I think we did.
It's insane. It's absurd. Who cares who Richard Pitino cheers for?
In the last year or two, what Minnesota-based athlete have we've gotten into this discussion before?
Probably.
But I can't remember who it was or who that individual was rooting for. And in that case, what I recall is that guy, just because he comes to Minnesota, doesn't mean he has to root openly for every one of our teams.
You don't have to take it all.
In the sense of community and Ubuntu, I get it. If you want to don... if you're a Viking, you want to don a Twins cap. Well, God knows why you would at this point. But if you did, that's cool. That's fine, whether you have much allegiance to it. But if you grew up rooting for another baseball team, give me a break.
Right. Exactly right.
What are you talking about? But that's my disappointment is he bowed to societal pressures.
I know. He should have come out with even more.
That's exactly
a hat.
It. Yes.
Type of glasses. Maybe he should have, called someone a bad name like an Eagles fan would. Swearing at somebody, threatening people. Maybe he should have gone full Eagle fan. I don't know.
218 guy writes, Towns routinely wore his Philadelphia Eagles gear here.
Yeah.
And nobody didn't give a bleep.
I think we understand. People come from elsewhere.
We're more civilized? I don't think we are in everything.
No,
I think it depends on the team. It depends on the circumstance.
Well, here we all hate the Eagles, obviously.
So
there's big reason why we would be upset, but it's his childhood team. Let it go.
Yeah, I wish I could remember. Somebody in our audience will remember.
They will, because it has happened a lot.
We've definitely talked about it from time to time.
And they always have to explain themselves, well, I cheer for all of them, and if they play each other, I hope it's a great game.
The fact that there were actually people, and I think it's because we've been conditioned to react this way, who are cringing for him. I feel so bad for him, man. How could he? Oh, really? Oh, man. read the room, guy. Don't be so tone deaf. It's just, what are you doing? Come on, you got to be smarter than that. Let's save that you got to be smarter than that for maybe, Anthony Edwards not flipping the bird from the locker or from the sidelines for the 10th time.
Right,
the case
to get yet another technical and fine.
Yeah, to me, it would be more of that. By the way, I do want to talk a little Wolves. What a valiant final three quarters. This team showing what they're all about. Their fiber, I think, was pretty much revealed through the last three quarters of the ball game. Unfortunately, we still lost, I think. We lost to a team that is down like 8 players, isn't very good even when they're at full strength. And we did that, of course, because we can't even say they played with their food in the first quarter. They just didn't show up. Are we back to that?
They missed their reservation.
Really back to that? We'll discuss and prepare for our first guest, Chip Scoggins, on where the Vikings go from here. That is at 3. CJ in Minneapolis. Warriors punched us in the mouth with aggressive on-ball D, especially a shooter on Dante. It totally stalled out our half-court game in quarter one. Poor guy isn't a point guard, so this falls on in-game adjustments by the coaching staff. Well, he's not all wrong because we've all, I think, accepted that a change to the starting lineup had to take place. But it always came with an asterisk in terms of, how helpful it could be. Right? In theory, then you got Conley with people where you can get more out of him, and maybe you get a little bit more offense early because Conley continues to shoot poorly. But on the other hand, we said there are times when this offense needs offense and scoring, and then there's time where it needs direction, and that's what's funky and tricky and challenging about putting this thing together. So I don't know that there's a good answer. What in a real world, you're going to get both at the same time. That's what you're supposed to get, unfortunately. I don't know how much of it you were watching in the first quarter. I was mesmerized because I kept waiting for Finchie to call a timeout.
Well, a second one.
Yeah, exactly. Or a third one.
Right.
And I got to a point, and I don't know if he addressed this last night or not, that this was one of those times where he purposefully was saying, bleep you.
Right.
I ain't going to do what we're supposed to do. Bleep you.
Right.
Figure this crap out, and hopefully pride at some point will enter in to this discussion. That, once again, we're back. I thought we were so far past this, but we're back to troubling episodes in Minnesota Timberwolves history. This is what that first quarter was beyond troubling. It again makes you wonder about the seriousness of the entire operation. Again, right?
Yes.
And Ant, he explored it, but at some point the words become cheap.
Totally.
Because he's done that several times before. And it was a disembowelment in the first quarter. And again, Golden State's playing with house money. They're down. Could you name 3 of their starters? Well,
no.
Yeah, you probably could.
Well, one guy was making his first start, I think, last night.
Exactly it. And I was there much booing? Because I don't remember.
I think there was some grumbling. But I think most people in the first quarter were this is what I was concerned.
Just stunned?
Well, that they were going to have to stop the game, not because Finchie called another timeout, but that a Timberwolves fan standing in anticipation as they're directed until they score their first score. I thought multiple people might pass out and end up on the floor because they were asked to stand for so long and their knees might have locked up. Because it was like 4.5 minutes.
It was.
Before they actually got a bucket. Yeah, they did the usual.
And the defense was no better. That's the thing.
The ball was popping around.
Oh, my God.
And I know Steph Curry never stops moving. We're happy for Steph Curry.
Yes.
But honest to God, though, how many times in the first and the fourth can we just have no awareness of where he is at all? How do you lose track ever of Steph Curry? But certainly on this team where there's no Klay Thompson, there's no Day right now.
Correct.
Kuminga, who's also been good for them, factor last night. That's right. It was very, very bad.
It was.
And I thought they were going to steal it because they did come back, but they could never, for a while, they couldn't get it to single digits, and then they obviously, I don't think they ever led. I don't think they ever led in that game. Wire to wire. Did we have a lead late? Did we go back and forth at all?
I think you're right.
Either way, it wasn't until the last couple of minutes because we didn't score for 4.5, and I'm using we. I don't know why today, but I am.
I'm trying to find the key Johnny Athletic.
By the way, DiVincenzo was brilliant last night.
Yes, he was. Rebounding, scoring, moving, the whole bit. Yeah.
He's playing at an extremely high level.
Yeah. That's it. But that's the way it is now. It's like, okay, one guy's great and the other guys are just okay.
Exactly.
It's a mixture. And here's Warriors have turned 6 turnovers into 14 points. It's been a Wolves killer all year long. How many times have we talked about the turnover crap? It's just endless. Johnny, just an inexcusable quarter from the Wolves. Terrible on both ends of the floor. Warriors are not a good team. They're severely shorthanded at the end of a long trip, and they blew the doors off the home team. Gut check time. See, I don't even think gut check matters at that point. I think
gut check should have happened 2 months ago.
Yeah, that or you can't have a quarter like that at all. So the gut check, whether you come back from it and make it interesting, which they ultimately did, I don't give them any grace for that. No, not at this point, not where we are, not given the circumstances of what this Golden State Warriors team is. So I got to tell you, I'm kind of back to, we're obviously going to talk Wolves, but I can't hunker down in it right now and pretend that it's worth the time. It really isn't at this point worth the time. It's going to be intermittent, I think, is the best way for me to look at it. Now, I'll kind of duck in and out is what I'll do. I just don't know why I should be more committed, to the ongoing product if they're just not able. It's like I said, it's a couple different things. Is it they can't figure it out from a putting these pieces together standpoint on a regular basis, or are we back to effort in some cases? Is it we do have guys who, behind the scenes, there's more agenda stuff going on and not much Ubuntu at this point. Not that we always hear about it publicly, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Those problems don't exist. I don't know, but it's that was painful, embarrassing, whatever series of terms you want to come up with, and maybe I still have too much scar tissue, like you do, of all the putrid years, that I'm going to overreact a bit whenever I see even a trace of that, a semblance of that for one quarter. But that's not my fault. I've lived through it. I reserve the right, I think, to revert back to it and to think the worst and to say, because I think we all were kind of celebrating that they didn't win the title last year. I didn't expect them necessarily to win a title this year, but I did expect we were past that kind of stuff. And I mean, that was just such a horrific look. And as I said, there were the quotes. In fact, I think Johnny's got the Edwards comments here too. Let me see if I can find them again.
Elston Turner talked about it at halftime with Katie Storm. Well, we just didn't have the energy in the first quarter. How is that possible?
There's no
8:30 at home against a beatable team on national TV. Not that it should matter, but I thought football players always talk about loving to play when everybody's watching them. The country is watching last night.
Yeah, we got another game on national TV on the holiday on Monday, if I'm not mistaken.
Do we?
Yeah, I think we're the first of two.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's NBA TV or one of the other networks. I think it's in Memphis with the Grizzlies.
A week from Sunday, we have, or maybe Saturday, we have the Nuggets here.
Yeah,
2 o'clock.
and
I think that's
a lot
Sunday.
better. Yeah.
That's like the big one.
That's a big one.
2 o'clock on ABC.
Cleveland might beat us by 60.
Cleveland's good.
Because they don't mess around.
They don't wait for you.
No. Anthony Edwards, the starting five, we are terrible. Every game we come out low energy and the second group comes in and gives us energy. I would say the starting group got to come out with more energy, like we want to play the game of basketball, like we love the game.
How many times have we heard something like that?
I don't even, it doesn't even mean anything at this point.
It does not.
They're just hollow words that don't make sense. Then he tried to give himself a little bit of the moral victory. We know we got to get better, but I think it's all about the finish. Not moral victories, but if we fought, we was down 10-32 in the fourth quarter. You'd have thought it was going to be like New York, but we fought, so I'm proud of that. So
it wasn't like the Knicks game. Hang the banner.
Yeah, because we never showed any sort of recovery in that game, right?
It was one of the more painful nights.
It was just awful.
Carl had like 80 points.
And as we said yesterday, schedule about to get a little bit more daunting, correct? We're in a stretch now. Now, I know that's going to be the comeback. Well, that's why, because they'll, we tend to play up to the level of competition. Come on, man.
But these are the games that are supposed to be, and I've said it a lot, right? That's kind of kept me somewhat sane through this first 40-ish games, because we're halfway through the season now, by the way, as well. Essentially, we're at the halfway point.
Yeah.
They're not too far out of spot X or spot Y or spot Z, right, in terms of the seeding.
Correct.
But then you look, and it's a loss to a bad Miami team with no buckets. It's 2 losses to Portland, which were ridiculous. It's the loss last night. There's like 7 or 8 of those halfway through that are just ridiculous games. So when you do lose a game against a good Memphis team like they did here on Saturday night, okay, that happens. Ja Morant's going to happen, even though the last minute was a debacle. But then you get the gimme games, the ones that you need to win, that separate the good teams from the average teams, and you mess around with them and you lose them. Including the Washington game a couple of nights ago that they ended up winning by double digits, but Correct. It was a disaster for 3 quarters.
What were we talking about yesterday? Start establishing what you had a year ago, making this, once again, the house of pain. We warned you that they just lost the Warriors at home before Christmas. We lose again last night. We're now 10-9 at home. We only lost 11 games all of last season. And by the way, I don't think the Wild lost last night. I know we have more excuses, right, because we have more injuries.
Yep.
I think we're 11-9-1 at home. That's what's odd about this record. We've actually had a better record on the road than we've had at home. Whatever happened in any of our sports to trying to double down on what's supposed to be called the home ice, home field, home court advantage.
We had it a little bit at U.S. Bank this year. I think we only lost 1 game there.
We did. Yeah. Somebody just texted out of bitterness, Sol and Blaine, use the bleeping bench. I don't disagree with that either, because, and I know it's easy to say, you haven't seen these guys in practice, but again, I would be, it doesn't happen in this league anymore, I guess. But I guess I wouldn't have minded a second Finch timeout to remove all 5 starters.
Yeah.
Now, college coaches do that occasionally to make a point. I don't know if it ever happens in the pros anymore, but that's what I'd like to see. Put anybody out there. Put Luka out there for 5. And I don't care if he gives up 12 points in 3 minutes. What the hell's the difference? He'll at least exert some effort, right? A couple of the other kids would exert effort. Start doing stuff like that. Figure this thing out. We're getting too late to play around this way. And then the post-mortem, the self-reflection, and we haven't done this quite right, and what's wrong with us here, and we've got to have a team meeting. Oh, God, it's boring. It's counterproductive. Why don't we talk some Vikings? We may get into some Wolves with our next guest, but I believe our Vikings chief brain wizards met the Jackals today. And we'll talk about some of that with Chip Scoggins, the sports columnist for the Star Tribune. He is going to join us next. In addition, very quickly, the inbox, if I haven't mentioned it, at 4:30. And it's K-Train's return to the Bumper to Bumper show at 5:30. Sad circumstances. We will ode a guy he knows very, very well, who, do we have an age, by the way, on Bob Uecker?
90.
90 year, good run. Bob Uecker passes away, and there's a great, above and beyond the obvious connections, because Cato grew up in Milwaukee with Uecker, there's another connection involving Cato Kalin's father, which we will discuss with him at 5:30 this evening, and we'll get to one other guest as well, scheduled out of Los Angeles, California, at about 4:05.
Kind of keep those discussions internal.
Quarterback whisperer earlier today met the media Jackals along with the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings, and an interesting question from, I believe it was Kevin Seifert, elicited that answer. Chip Scoggins writes for the Star Tribune, joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. And Chip, as you well know, I think, there had been a shock jock report from Mike Florio suggesting there might be some tension between the coach and the ownership of this team, going back to the decision to not work on his contract after last season. It certainly appeared that KOC was dismissing that, did nothing to fuel the fire of that. Let me start with that part before we get to his response. Do you have any inside information, or even does your gut tell you that it might be a source of tension or it might make this contract approach or these negotiations any more difficult than they otherwise might have been?
Well, I don't know that I have inside information, but I would say any human that thinks they've done a good job that didn't get an extension would probably feel a little bitterness, right?
Right.
If you look around, you didn't want to sign me last offseason. I feel like I've done a good job, whatever. If you feel like he deserved it, you might have a little, I don't know if bitterness, maybe that's too strong, but just kind of curiosity, like what do they want to see? So I don't know if that's playing into it, but if I'm Kevin O'Connell, I'm probably happy right now that I didn't sign it before this season, because I have to imagine the price tag has gone up significantly in his favor. So he's going to benefit from having not signed an extension before this season, because you put 14 wins out there and what they did, that gives him a lot of leverage in his way. And then we saw was it last week? These last 2 weeks feel like they've been forever, but I think it was last week when the report came out about from Jay Glazer about there are teams interested in trying to trade for him. The Vikings aren't going to do that, obviously, but I don't think that's coincidence that got flown out there, floated out there either. So I have to believe that this will get done. Both him and Kwesi talked about they met with ownership after the season in the last couple of days, kept what their conversations were private, but I would have to think that this is going to come together pretty quickly. I can't imagine this is going to be, negotiations that drag out too long. They shouldn't. I think they have momentum. Even though as bad as the season ended, you can't discount where they're at in the momentum and all the things that they have kind of working on their, particularly O'Connell, what he's done here to create a pretty strong culture.
All right. So if Chip Scoggins is general manager of the club instead of Kwesi, who is in your quarterback room when the offseason or training camp certainly begins?
You're reading my column that I'm writing. I go with the J.J. McCarthy, Daniel Jones, and try to get Daniel Jones to the bridge contract, similar to what you had with Sam Darnold this year. Right. I think they just have with too many holes in this roster, with uncertainty with unrestricted free agents, too many draft misses, not just with Kwesi, but the previous regime too, that they don't have enough young talent. They had to rely so much on their free agents that came in that it became an old team all of a sudden. They need to get younger, and they need to find guys that are not on the back end of their prime or not on 1-year deals. I don't know if they're going to be able to do all that because they don't have enough draft picks. They've had some success with undrafted guys, but I just think to even franchise Darnold at $40 million, even though you could trade him, although I'm not guaranteed that you're going to find a trade partner. Right. This was a bridge season from the beginning. The whole plan was to draft J.J. McCarthy with the idea that you'd have a bridge season probably with Darnold, and then you turn it over to him. Now, it's complicated because of his injury, and, they said he's on the field. He's actually on there today. Kwesi said he saw him working out on the indoor practice field. But there's no guarantees that he's either going to be 100% physically ready or just in the spot where you feel comfortable that he's your starter on the season opener. I don't think you want to have Nick Mullins as your backup. You need to have a better option there. So that's where I go to Daniel Jones. If they feel good about what they saw in the, 7 weeks that they had him, to try to get him to a bridge deal, and I would have those two guys be my 1 and 2.
If you could get Darnold, if Darnold's people realize that the market has shriveled up overnight, whether they think that's fair or not, that it has. If it's shriveled up enough to where you could get Darnold back 1 year, $20 million, or 2 years, $40 million, would you even be tempted at all? I ask because, again, it was an abrupt collapse. Obviously, you can't give him big money at this point, I don't think. But the comeback to it, if you want to be generous, is, look, he's not a kid. He's 27, but this was his first experience with real football, quite frankly, where anything was at stake, and he didn't do very well with it. But we usually say that's a process, man. It may take time to figure out, what it's like in the big leagues. Now, there's exceptions, including the quarterback from Washington, but is there any inkling, if you could get something like that you'd say, no, he was awfully good to see. They figured something out. There has to be a way to get a little more out of him and make him the guy who gives you a little bit more, not leverage exactly, but insurance if indeed McCarthy needs it a little extra time.
I would do it if you could convince him to take 1 year, $20 million, with the understanding that, hey, when JJ's ready, he's our starter.
Right.
If he signed off on that, I would do it. I would do it because you know what you have in him versus Daniel Jones.
Right.
They may think Daniel Jones has a higher ceiling. I don't know. They haven't really come out and said what their true feelings on Daniel Jones are. But if you could get it for that, another bridge that's not a substantial increase, with the understanding that, hey, J.J. McCarthy's the future. When he's ready, he's the starter. That's what we're going to do. I would do that, but I don't think that Darnold's camp would go for that. I don't know if he'd go for that. Yeah. And I don't know what the market's going to be like for him, Dan. It's either. Interesting because I just have no idea. Our team's going to look at those last two games and say, yep, there it was. That's the Sam Darnold we know. Or are they going to say, you know what? Okay, he had 2 bad games. We're not going to discount the first 16. Are they going to look at this and say, look at the circumstances around him? Kevin O'Connell, Justin Jefferson. He was in a really good spot for him to flourish, and maybe we don't have that, so we're not going to get that version of Sam Darnold. I can't get a grasp, and I don't know if anybody really does yet, what his market value is going to be. But I would certainly go to him and throw that idea of what you just said out there and see what he thought.
Yeah, because I would consider that too. Especially, like you said, if you get him 1 year, 20. But maybe I'm crazy. Maybe there's enough need at the quarterback position that there'll be a couple of teams that will lie to themselves about what they think they can get, and they'll just say, well, we know we have to overpay because we got to get somebody, and at least he showed something, and if we can continue to build on what he did during the regular season, that's the unknown. But there's a part of me that wonders if there's going to be, if the market literally disappeared overnight, possibly, in terms of any kind of long-term deal or the kind of money where you're talking about $30 million or certainly $40 million, and then maybe you're back to 20.
Well, and we were talking about this today. Let's just assume a hypothetical. Let's say those last 2 games they lose, and he plays poorly, but not, or average. Right. What conversation are we having then? It might be more black,
yes.
Less black and white for you, but I just think the way that he looked and the Detroit game, the overthrows and how shaky he looked, and then this playoff game, the fact that I don't think this was all his fault at all. I think
I don't either.
The fact that he was holding the ball and taking the sacks when it seemed counterproductive to have an offensive line that you think is shaky, which O'Connell admitted afterwards with his interior, and calling these slow developing pass plays down the field. It just set him up that's how he was going to look. He was holding the ball trying to, wait for guys to come open down the field. So it wasn't all his fault, but he didn't look good. And it was just 2 really, really, really poor performances. And so it would have been interesting to see what our conversation would have been like that. But I think it was just so stark, Dan. It just was so remindful of the Jets and what he went through at Carolina that, it hurt his market value. It hurt his, what he's going to be able to track, I think, on the open market. I can't imagine it was the same dollar figure as what it was after that Packers game. You can't tell me that it didn't hurt his value.
Dramatically. As somebody said it, and I think it all of a sudden he he looked like a quarterback playing for his 4th team in 7 years. And it'd been nothing like that during the season, right? He looked like a thoroughbred, basically. And then at the end, it's back to, he's one of those guys who goes from team to team, and he has a little success and not much, and then he struggles, and then that team gives up on him, and the next team grabs him. He looked like 4th, team in 7-year guy when it mattered, unfortunately, and cruelly for the Minnesota Vikings. Chip Scoggins, StarTribune.com. Is Aaron Jones going to be the number 1 running back next year? Is he going to be back next year?
I don't know. I think I would be hesitant to pay him big money, or even, I don't know what his salary was this year. I think
it was $10 million this year.
Yeah, $10 million. With his age, and he got pretty beat up. He was dealing with stuff, it seemed like every game down the stretch. I tend to think they'll probably try to get younger there, get less expensive there. healthier there. So as much as we all love dealing with him, just a true professional, and what a great addition he was for this first year. I think if it was me, I think I would move on and try to find a different option there.
So you wrote already, I think, the question about, okay, here's where the team is strong, here's where it has to get better. Give us some of those spots where you say, leaving the quarterback out of this discussion for the moment, as hard as that is to do, where else you see big-time work needs to be done in the offseason?
Well, I think first and foremost, interior offensive line. I think 2 and ideally 3 new starters, 2 guards and a center. I just think you have to shore that up. They're just not big and powerful enough. That's what you need. It's interesting. Kwesi said today that, because someone asked him about O'Connell's critique after the game, that he said, yeah, they need to update or upgrade there and get better. And Kwesi said, well, that could mean players getting better or doing different things. And, in the run game, I disagree. I think he said get better personnel. Counting on Garrett Bradbury to improve at this stage in his career, I think is a little unrealistic. So I think they need to invest heavily there. My hunch is they have I think they're going to have $70 million salary cap room. I would try to make a splash in free agency to get the top guard there. Mm-hmm. And there's secondary. I mean, you look at between Harrison Smith and Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffith and Cam Bynum, you have a lot of unknowns there. Who's coming back? Who's going to be gone? Who can you re-sign? Who's going to retire? So I think interior offensive line and secondary are the 2 biggest ones. But I still think they need one of those massive defensive tackles in the middle, guy that can collapse the pocket. So I would address interior defensive line too. I think those 3, outside of the quarterback, those 3 are the biggest question marks. 763 guy writes, listening to national sports media, it sounds like the Darnold market will be strong. I think the local scar tissue is causing us to quickly feel like we were duped again and nobody would possibly want him. That might be true. I don't know. Like you said, it only takes a couple of teams, and everybody needs a quarterback. So maybe it holds up. It's certainly not going to be what it was when he was, even as recently as after the Green Bay game. I mean, I don't think there's any chance that, because there are people throwing out numbers like, $40 million, $42 million a year for 4 years, for 160 for 4 years. It ain't nothing like that. I believe is going to happen at all. I guess it's what the threshold comes to. Is there a team out there that says, okay, we'll give you 2 years, $60 million? That's possible, I guess. And that's obviously, I think, too rich for the Vikings to mess with on the basis of the way this thing ended. But I'm going to be very curious to see how quickly that we find out, right? Exactly, because usually things move pretty fast, right? Once we hit the free agency period. Well, and this is the whole timing thing with me. And to the caller's point, it's cliche, but it only takes one team.
Yeah.
And maybe they can explain away the last 2 games. But the timing of it, Dan, is interesting because. They said J.J. McCarthy's he's on the field progressing and he's throwing and working out. But they have to make a decision on a backup before they're going to know if he's 100% ready to start the season.
Yep.
Like, they can't wait till July to figure out that he's not going to be ready. So you have to decide, is it Darnold? Is it Daniel Jones? Is it someone else? I don't think it's Nick Mullins. I think you need to shoot higher for that for your guy, because you're talking about someone that you possibly have to start the first game or the first 4 games, whatever. So the timing makes it complicated, that you have to figure this out pretty quickly, not knowing completely where J.J. McCarthy is going to be in June and July and August.
Yeah, that's the truth of it. You're right. One other KOC question. You think in terms of these contract negotiations, is there any chance you think that part of what KOC is going to push for through his agent is maybe a little bit more authority? This team's got a general manager, obviously. And I don't know. The assumption is the Wilfs view them as a pair, and I'm presuming they like them both the same. I don't know. I don't know if that's true. But there's been a lot of whispering behind the scenes, I think. This goes back to even before the season, I think, that KOC was kind of quietly getting more and more, even in terms of the draft, more and more involved, whether or not he had the title, whether or not he had, quote-unquote, final say, that there'd been kind of murmurings that he was sort of, working his way in. Have you heard anything about that, or do you think that could have any impact in terms of what he's asking for beyond the pile of cash?
Well, it's interesting because my experience has been every football coach wants to have as much say on the personnel side as they can because they're the ones charged with. But I would say this. I do think Kwesi, because he comes from a non-football background, has been pretty open about taking suggestions and input from coaches. I think if Brian Flores goes to him and says, I want Andrew Van Ginkel, I want Blake Cashman, I want Stephon Gilmore, I want this. These are the guys that fit my scheme. I think he's willing and has a track record of doing that. So I think there's as much flexibility with this coaching staff in terms of, for lack of a better way, getting their way with the guys that they want brought in here. I got to imagine that J.J. McCarthy is here because KOC picked him. He's the quarterback he wanted, right?
Right.
So would he want more of that? Possibly, but I feel like there's that's already in place where the general manager is willing to, understand what he doesn't know about the football side of it and listen to his coaches and his personnel people and try to make those moves happen.
There may well be some truth to that. Final couple thoughts outside of the world of the Minnesota Vikings. Is it possible that this is going to be the winter of the Minnesota Wild, not so much the Timberwolves, where a year ago it was obviously a lot more about the Wolves and not the Wild? What do you think?
If they can get healthy, that's the biggest thing. I mean, I went out there earlier in the year when they were, healthy, and Kaprizov was playing like the best player in the league, and they were fun. I mean, they just need to get healthy. I got to be honest with you, Dan. Watching the Timberwolves right now is hard.
It is.
It's joyless. You watched that team last year, the way they played and how connected they were and how tenacious they were on defense and all the vibe that you got, it's gone. Like, you watch these games and it's just, it's hard to watch.
Painful at times. It was painful first quarter last night. We spent the second segment on it. We should be, this franchise should be so far past that kind of core. I know teams have up and down, and they don't shoot well, whatever. But to have a quarter with that gutless a performance at this point, I thought we were past all that, Chip.
Well, it's getting a little tiring after every game.
Yeah.
It's like, our starters are not good. We have no energy. We didn't come out here. It's like, I thought you were grown up. That's what we all talked about last year, that this organization has grown up. And now it's back to this stuff where you watch them on offense. Sometimes it's so disjointed. It's like five guys and five cabs. It's like they have no idea of how to play together. So I still feel like there's enough talent they can pull together, but something's missing. Something's definitely missing. Yeah,
there's no question. And I guess the key question moving forward is the patience level of Tim Conley, right? Because there's some times where he's been very patient. There are other times he's pulled the trigger and surprised us with when he's done that. And that's the key to this, is how is he digesting what he's seeing? Is he going, I've seen enough. This combo isn't working. I got to try something. Now, again, what's that something? Randall would be the logical guy to go, but what are you getting for Randall at this point? I don't know if that's a deck chair story. I'm not sure. And again, they're not, they're 500, basically. They're a 500 team, right? They're not awful, but the vibe is so different from a year ago. And the words, as you say, are absolutely starting to ring hollow, where you just yawn. Okay, all right, Ant is said again, we got no energy. It's like, okay, well, we've heard this 6 times. And then a different day, it's something about Rudy, right? And then one day it's something about Randall. And for a while, it was about Dante. And I've said a couple times, I'm close to saying, even if it risks their playoff position, start playing a bunch of people and pull people out and just start playing. Even if they're not ready, I'd rather see something different or see a few players who might bring at least a little bit of energy to the equation, because this is just, nothing is sustained. We think, okay, 3-game winning streak. What do we got going? They figuring it out now? It doesn't seem to last long enough. And then we have a performance like last night against a Golden State team that is completely decimated by injury and illness, and not that good anyway, playing at the end of a long trip, and you let them get the jump on you in the first quarter at home.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's totally disappointing. And you mentioned patience. there is, when you shake up the team and the core as dramatically as Conley did, we get rid of Cat and bring in Randall, there is that time where you have to say, okay, we have to see how this, let them work through it. Let them try to figure it out. But at some point, don't you just say, this is who they are?
Yep.
Like,
that's the concern.
This is it. Like, patience is not limitless. At some point, you have to do something dramatic to ignite it. And I don't know what that magic number is, but it's getting harder and harder as these problems continue. And then last night was just inexcusable. That first quarter was inexcusable. And to not win that game with everything that was going against Golden State, it's just a problem, and it's a bad look for the team right now.
So it sounds like, trade? Did Conley make a move?
No.
Oh.
But tomorrow night, last night's spark plug, Dante DiVincenzo will be unavailable with a left great toe sprain.
Oh, no.
He's out.
Oh,
the dreaded toe sprain? Those things can last for years.
They can.
Oh, my God. Is that like turf toe?
I don't know.
Yeah. That's not good. That's not helpful because he has been playing well lately.
In his return to New York, which he'd want to play well.
Got to be kind of down about that. So am I reading? Will I read a Darnold column tomorrow in the Star Tribune from Chip Scoggins? Is that correct? Or quarterback?
I'm just looking at all the quarterback options and kind of what I would do, and I laid them out here. But that was the whole thing today was about quarterbacks and contracts. That was the biggest talkers out here, and I think the two most pressing issues as we wrap up this season.
Question. Thanks for the time as always, especially on short notice, Chipper. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, my friend. Chip Scoggins, one of the best, joining us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline on a busy day that will include the inbox at 4:30. Keep the letters coming to Guardsy, JG at KFAN.com. Man, there's great possibilities at this point. I mean, it's wide open. I mean, how much grade A material could you be asking for, especially in the snark division? Cato Kalin at 5:30 to help us on our Ode to a Dead Guy segment. And when we come back, a former KFAN intern, Brian Grant, who is now based in Southern California, will give us an updated view of what the situation continues to be out there. He is next. Stay tuned.